Pop, what's going on, man?
Son, just another day.
Just another day, just another flu game pod. You know how it goes, man. The boys are cold and flu season doesn't quit around here. Oh my goodness, we're
You got
fighting
a
through it
box of
though.
tissues next to you?
We're fighting through it though. No comment. Let's keep it rolling, man. It has been an absolutely thrilling start to the off season for the Commanders. I mean, we were wondering, like, what are we going to talk about this weekend? A few days ago, we're like, oh, there's just nothing. We exhausted. We even like met after the pod, our last pod, and we were like, I think we've exhausted too many topics. We might be in trouble. And then bang, John Allen requests a trade, not coming back. And then that almost feels irrelevant because yesterday I'm in a session, I'm working, and I get a text from my friend Chris, like this cryptic text, but he just goes, "There you go." And I just go, "What?" And then sure enough, I open Twitter. A few seconds later, Deebo Samuel confirmed traded to the Washington Commanders. We find out minutes after that it's for a fifth round pick, so pick 148 for Deebo. So the 49ers are going to take on a ton of dead cap money for that trade. Taking on 31.5 million. We're going to be paying 17 or about 18 million, 17.5 million for 2025 for his cap charge. He's going to play on a prove-it deal, basically. And that's where we're at. That's the update. That's the vibes. That's what we're going to be
Are
discussing
we sure
today.
about that? Are we sure they're not going to try to extend him?
I don't think so. I think it's going to be I think this is basically like a Zach Ertz, Bobby Wagner situation where it's a 1-year prove-it deal. It's a chance for Deebo to come here, prove that he's worth that top NFL receiver money, and we see what we can do. I don't know with the questions surrounding him if you want to extend him right now, but let's get into it. Pop, react. Let the people know how you're feeling.
It's exciting news. I mean, I think at the end of the day, for a fifth round pick, it's worth a shot. No question about it. I mean, this guy's, if you go back and look at his highlights from the past 3 or 4 years, I mean, it's dynamic. So it's definitely tailed off a bit, and we'll get into some of those stats the last couple of years. There might be multiple reasons for that. But for a fifth round pick, I just think it's a great move. And I think it's a situation where you've got one team that's got challenges with cap space that needs to figure out ways of freeing up. They just committed to Brandon Ayuk. It doesn't necessarily mean that they've totally given up on Deebo Samuel as a player, but they look at him in his last year of his contract and they need to do something. And then another team that's got available cap space wants to take a swing and obviously has folks in the organization that's familiar with this player. It's exciting news. You never know how these things are going to work out, but it's exciting news. I know you're super confident.
Yeah, I feel really good about this deal for a lot of reasons. First things first, it's a fifth round pick. No disrespect to the young man. Our fifth round pick last year was Dominique Hampton.
Yeah.
Did he get his name called once?
It's a
this
low risk
year?
proposition.
It's a low risk proposition. I hope Hampton goes on to be a stud. But you're not these once you get past round 3, these guys 4 through 7, you are drafting cheap backups and lottery tickets. That's what you're drafting. That's just how the NFL draft works. And if you hit the lottery and you get Fred Warner or Tom Brady, great. But there's a reason we know all those names. It's because they don't happen all that often. So you're trading away, Braden Daniels or Ricky Stromberg, those guys who got drafted higher than the fifth round. You're trading away guys that probably are not going to be in the league in 4 years for a guy in Deebo Samuel who immediately jumps on this roster and becomes the playmaker 1C on the offense. You've got Daniels is obviously 1A, McLaurin 1B, and 1C, Deebo. This changes everything about how you defend this team, in my opinion. This changes a lot about the way the offense works, and he is just such a plug-in and play upgrade on this offense. You just immediately take Deebo. Look at all those. I tweeted last night, somebody was showing a highlight reel of Deebo, and one of the most impressive plays was one of those tunnel screens that Cliff ran to De'Ami Brown all the time. If you'll remember, De'Ami Brown had a crucial fumble on one of those tunnel screens against the Eagles that really hurt us. And Diaby was relatively decent at running those, but he was decent for our Washington Commander standard of, oh, he gets 8 yards, he gets 12 yards, he gets 11 yards. When Deebo Samuel touches the football, a touchdown is in play. Every single time he touches the football and he has open green grass in front of him. He is that type of player.
Well,
So that's something we haven't had here.
yeah, what I like about the player and the profile of the player is, one, there aren't a lot of comparable players out there to Deebo Samuel in terms of what he brings, right? The
No.
combination of size, power, speed at the wide receiver position, somebody that can get some carries. We've seen it at the running back position, but we haven't seen it at the wide receiver position. And I think he really complements what this team, he complements Terry McLaurin really well, right? Terry can give you that deep threat. They're very different players, and I love that, right? And I think that it's amazing to me sometimes, like, and just the one side, and I know that you probably got some more to say about this, but the one side of people saying, oh, he's going to take targets away from Terry. Well, didn't we all want a number 2 receiver? Like, are you kidding me? What is that? He's more likely to take targets away from, if they're even on the team, a De'Ami Brown, a Noah Brown, a Zacchaeus, right? Not a Terry McLaurin. I think what Terry does really well is still very much in play for this thing. So I think that, I love his skill set. I love his ability. There are some question marks, which we can get into in a little bit, but for a 5th-round pick. And I thought Jay Gruden, who I love his analysis, had a great quote. So I just wanted, because this kind of sums up how I feel. And it's really just around Deebo would be the perfect fit with the Commanders. He's strong, great blocker, can line up in slot or outside, and excellent after the catch. Just what they needed. And I think that's what we're seeing here is the fit of the player with the team, with the scheme, with the organization. They obviously must feel like he's what they want in a commander. The fact that he's not afraid to get dirty, block, run the ball, do all those different kind of things. I think it's exciting. And by the way, go back and listen. We did our offseason pod, and we were talking about, I think our first offseason pod, and we were talking about trade possibilities. We both said for a 5th-round pick, do it.
Sign me up. Yeah.
Sign me up. Now, the contract situation is interesting because he held out once when he was in the last year of his contract, right? And that the 49ers signed him to 3 years. Is he really willing to get in a situation where it's a 1-year prove it deal? I like the idea. If that's something that I would, from a Commander's perspective, I'd be totally fine making it a 1-year prove it. Let's prioritize signing Terry. Let's let Deebo show us what he can do on a 1-year deal. Worst case, you've lost a 5th-round pick, which is no big deal, like we've already covered. But I'm wondering if that's really how this thing's going to play out.
I think so, because I think if you look at the situation that he was in last time versus the situation that he's in this time in terms of the new deal, it's a very different situation. He's coming off of a down year last year. He's coming off of a year last year where he missed more time than he usually misses, which we'll get into that later. That's a question mark that I think is blown a little bit out of proportion, but we'll get into that later. He's coming.
He hasn't missed that much time, really.
Exactly. He's coming off of a year where if you were to pay Deebo based off of what he did last year, it would hurt his overall value comparatively to what he's produced in years past, right? So I think it benefits both parties here to let Deebo play this out. $17 million for a wide receiver 2 is not expensive in today's day and age. It just isn't. So you're going to pay that out. You're going to let him play. By the way, Jonathan Allen, who we mentioned earlier in the pod, we'll talk about a little bit more later, going to be traded, basically cancels it out. Doesn't hurt our cap. We're either going to cut John Allen and make that money back, or we're going to trade him and clear that money in the first place. So that's handled. So don't think about the money. But it benefits Deebo and Washington, I think, to let Deebo play this last year out, because Deebo's in an opportunity where, by the way, Brock Purdy ain't no Jaden Daniels. He's in an opportunity to produce at a much higher clip, much better than he was in San Francisco here. He's going to be getting more targets, more touches. He's going to be more of the focal point of the offense here than he was there. And ideally, his numbers will reflect that. His production will reflect that, and he will command much more money next year. So I don't think they're going to I don't think it benefits either side really for Deebo to renegotiate at this point.
Yeah, and I think people say Brock Purdy's not Jaden Daniels. Obviously not. People know how I feel about Brock on this podcast, but what Jaden brings you with his dual threat ability, right? That frees up somebody like a Deebo Samuel because the defense can't necessarily key on Deebo, key on uh, Terry, key on Jaden. They got to pick their poison, and their poison they're going to pick is trying to take Jaden out of it, right? And
Yep.
that should free up space for Deebo, and the more weapons, the better. And I think it's super excited about the moves. Time's going to tell in terms of what it pays for. Hopefully, and that would be the 1 year prove it deal would almost force that. Hopefully, he comes in motivated, in shape. He's excited. I'm sure all those things are going to be true with him. So, yeah, it's sign me up.
Yep.
Sign me up.
Yeah, I'm all over it. Do you want to talk about one other point I want to make? He's not producing at the clip he was producing at in 2021, right? We can all agree at that.
Right.
That hasn't happened yet. They brought in Christian McCaffrey. Who's getting 30 touches a game. That was the whole point of bringing in Christian McCaffrey, was to take some tread off of Deebo's tires and to not burn out Deebo.
That's I had a Brandon Ayuk, not this last year, but
yeah, Brandon Ayuk had a breakout deal. The 49ers were a headache in fantasy football because you never knew who was going to go for 200 yards in any given week. It could be any one of the five guys. Now,
this past season
was
probably his worst, right? So, but it was a bad season all around for the 49ers.
Yeah, they completely fell apart. And I mean, the guy was hospitalized with a lung infection at one point in the season last year, and then he was kind of out for the rest of the year off that. He never really fully came back. Guys, think about how sick you have to be an elite cardiovascular athlete and get hospitalized with a lung infection. That's not a joke, dude. That is not a joke. That's going to cause production to dip. I don't care who you are.
Well, and you look at, he's only 1 year removed from a 1,000+ yard season between almost 900 yards receiving and 225 yards rushing. So if you kind of write last year off as just one of those anomalies, and you mentioned the illness and just the team in general having such a poor season, this is not, the whole idea of he's on the down slope. He's only 29 years old. Yes, he's got a very physical style. So, maybe that takes a little more tread off the tires than the typical receiver at his age. But there's a lot to be excited about with Deebo Samuel, and I'm sure this is going to breathe new life into him as well. Yeah, he's a competitor. He's someone that's chirped a little bit at times when he hasn't liked the way things are going, but you need a few of those guys. You can't have, everybody that's in the church choir or whatever you want to call it. I'm sure there's people that sing in church that are fiery on the field as well. But you know what I mean? Like it's good to have some of those guys, and you've said it best. I'll steal it from you. If anyone knows this character, it's AP, right?
Yeah.
And we've got a couple of guys between AP and Coach Lynn that know this player, and I'm sure they were racing to get this done. And there's going to be noise. I'm sure I can hear sports talk radio in particular. One person in particular, who I won't bring up, is going to say, we should have waited for him to get cut. It was a waste of a pick. No, come on. We don't know what other teams are offering. Maybe somebody was offering a sixth or a seventh. San Francisco was going to get something out of this. I'm sure somebody would have coughed up something. It's a good move, and it really shows. It's really a sign of how serious this team is about competing now.
Yeah.
If there was any doubt about that.
Exactly. And I mean, just think about it, man. Just think about it from a pure ball perspective. You line up. We're going to talk about the rest of our receivers later, but let's say Diami out wide on the right, Terry out wide on the left. You put Deebo in the slot, and you've got maybe a young running back that you draft in the backfield and you've got Ertz. You can motion Deebo into the backfield. Now he's a legitimate threat to hand the ball off. You can come out in a two-back set with Deebo in the backfield, motion him out to the slot. You can come out in an empty set with Deebo in the backfield, motion him out to the slot. What do you do? What do? You want to play man to shut down Deebo? Well, then you're turning your back on Jane Daniels. He's going to run. You play zone. Deebo is going to find an open space, and when Deebo has the ball in open space, he's one of the most dangerous players in the league. On
Yeah.
top of that, you cannot now take away Terry McLaurin the way that you were doing last season. That was when the offense started to slow down a bit, which is like really generous to even say they ever really slowed down. But when the offense started to run into some obstacles, teams were rolling the whole defense to take Terry out of the game, and then you're relying on 12 to 15 catches from De'Ami Brown and Olamide Zaccheaus, who are just, God bless them, not players at that level. So,
Well, but that's the point. Like if you think about it, our number 2 guy was a rotation of Ozzy, Noah Brown, De'Ami Brown, right?
yeah,
Well, let's say we can only bring one of those guys back at this point. You're essentially taking last year's offense and adding Deebo Samuel to it. Last year's offense was already
top 10 offense in the league
top 5.
with no running back.
Okay. And you've added Deebo Samuel to it. So, no running back's a little harsh, but
By the end of the year, you had no running back.
but
That's reality.
but I think that in and of itself, and I think the point is you take Deebo Samuel out of last year's offense, and AP ain't done yet, right? AP ain't done yet, so it's exciting.
So what's next
sure.
for our wide receiver group, Pop? You have 3 wide receivers under contract. You're going to need at least 3 more. You've got Terry McLaurin. You've got Deebo Samuel. How sick is that? And you've got Luke McCaffrey. So what else are you doing wide receiver group wise? What's next?
Look, at the end of the day, you can look at it and they're gonna do something, right, in the sense of that's brilliant. I like the idea we've talked about. I like the idea of bringing De'Ami back. I like the idea of bringing De'Ami back even more now because I feel like, again, you talk about pieces and complements. Now you got this guy that's a burner on the outside. I feel like it's just that would be a good threesome group. And and I think you can get him for a reasonable cost. I don't think like De'Ami Brown is not listed among the top free agent wide receivers. So if I had to pick a guy to bring back, I think it'd be De'Ami. Deebo's going to eat up what OZ was doing last year. I don't really see where that's much of a fit. Noah Brown could be okay. I tend to prefer De'Ami, but Noah was getting snaps ahead of De'Ami, so that could be okay. Of course, there's free agents as well. They're going to sign, another receiver or 2, whether it's bringing guys back or going out there. Probably realistically, I think they only bring one of those guys back. Maybe 1 plus Crowder, just because of what Crowder brings you in special teams, right?
And for the fact that Crowder is a guy that you're going to pay the vet minimum, maybe a little bit more than the vet minimum. You get
Plus,
great
he's just
value out of Crowder.
such a professional, right? I mean, if guys go down and you got to plug Jameson in, you feel totally fine about that, right?
Yep. Even our boy, Coach Lombard, who's famously critical of this Commander's roster, says he loves Crowder. So what more do you need to hear
for
an endorsement? Shout out, Coach. Always have fun chatting with you. But I think, for me, I tweeted it. I think our wide receiver room come training camp is going to be Terry, Deebo, De'Ami, Luke McCaffrey, OZ, and Crowder. And I think
you tweeted that before the trade.
I tweeted that before the trade.
Well before, which is great.
But I think OZ is a guy that you could see not being OZ. Maybe that turns into a Darius Slayton. Maybe that turns into a Nick Westbrook-Akine. Maybe that turns into a young wide receiver that you get in the draft. You get a guy that's maybe raw but has 4.3 speed in round 3. But overall, I think that's probably what it's going to look like. And I think, frankly, if you bring back De'Ami Brown, which would be my pick, because I think I've been beating the drum on this, I think De'Ami produced enough at the end of last season to show you he has potential to be a legit starting wide receiver in the NFL and a real piece that can help a team win, but did not produce enough over the course of his rookie deal that you got to pay him at that level. And I don't think the market will indicate that. So I think if you're only paying De'Ami $6 to $8 million a year over 3 or 4 years, you love that deal.
You
That's
know what?
awesome.
There's a number with Diami that you like a lot. He's 25.
Yeah,
Bringing a Diami back, it kind of makes it that you don't have to draft a receiver, and you can really focus on maybe getting a dynamic running back. Or obviously, we've got to focus on defensive, offensive line, depending on what happens in free agency. So I think the idea of bringing Diami back is he ascending? Is he on the rise? And he's a young receiver, a young player. I mean, there are guys that come out of the draft 23, 24 years old. So he's still a
yeah.
really young player that's ascending, that's doing some good things. You know, that's why he's my number one, because you're not bringing him back as a vet or somebody that's maybe on their last deal, right? And I'd be fine, 2, 3 year deal, like why not? Um, but I got a question for you, because before we leave this topic, how big do these quote unquote red flags that we've heard about with Deebo Samuel? Some people saying diva. Some people talk about the contract holdout. Some people talk about him coming in overweight, which has been a source of frustration for the 49ers, not always keeping himself in tip top shape. I've heard as recently as, people saw him at the Super Bowl and said he looked a little chunky, right? There's sideline confrontations, a little bit fiery. Do those red flags concern you at all, son?
Not.
Part of the story that we have to tell.
It's part of the story. You can tell it. That's fine. Not to a legitimate degree, because the bottom line is like Go Birds 11 on Twitter. You do not know more, and that's not an actual person. I'm just coming up with a nickname. You do not know more about Deebo Samuel than Adam Peters does. You just don't. And Peters brought in Wagner. He brought in Ertz. He brought in Luvu. He brought in Samerstill. He brought in Jaden. He brought in guys that set the culture, set the locker room. I trust wholeheartedly the guy that drafted this guy, put him in the position to be the guy that he is, and credit to Kyle Shanahan too, but he drafted him because he knew the fit that he had for that offense with Shanahan, right? Brought him in, developed him into what he became, and then re-signed him to a giant deal the second time. I think the guy that was an instrumental part in doing that, then sticking his neck out and saying, "Come on over here. I run the show over here. Come play with us now." I think that assuages all. I don't even know if that's a word or if I used it correctly,
Sounds good.
but that
I
wipes
couldn't tell you.
away that wipes away all concern for me about Deebo at that point, because yeah, I had somebody on Twitter tell me today it's similar to in Ron We Trust, and we chopped it up. We had a good conversation about it, but the guy turned around 30 plus players on the roster, built an NFC championship contender, made a potential championship contending roster in a year. He's earned my trust for an offseason. I'm cool
Yeah,
to say,
I
AP,
also
you got
think
it.
I also think that at best the things we've heard about are maybe yellow flags, not red flags. I think they're all in the grand scheme of things pretty minor compared to some things we hear about certain players, right?
I
So
mean, John
that's how I
Allen
feel.
and
I
Deron
think you're spot on.
John Allen and Deron Payne got in a fist fight on the sidelines, and we talk about John Allen like he's the second coming of Jesus when it comes to his character around this team for the last decade. These two got in a fist fight. It's
Yeah.
okay. It happens. You're asking these guys to get super juiced up and go put their lives on the line. And when they go out there and they compete and things aren't going well, they're not going to be happy. They shouldn't be happy. They shouldn't be happy. I'd be more concerned if Deebo was all smiles and hunky dory and happy about how the way things went in San Francisco last year.
Yeah, this is the kind of move we can make being in the position we're in. Maybe 3 or 4 or 5 years from
Exactly.
now, and you got, you know, Jaden on his deal.
Billion
Maybe
dollar contract.
maybe it's not possible, but the position we're in now, it makes total sense for this team. So, but you mentioned John Allen, so let's move on to the other big news of
Yep.
the week that kind of got a little squashed by all this, the John Allen news.
Poor John Allen, man. John Allen was supposed to be the star this week. Poor Johnny. Um,
I'm glad he's not. Not nothing against John Allen, but
the way things turned out, yeah, I am
yeah,
glad he's not. But so basically, John Allen's not going to be in burgundy and gold next year. There's no way around it at this point. I think the only way you see him in burgundy and gold is if there's absolutely no market for him, and you can you can cut and re-sign, like a la what we did with Landon Collins a few years ago, and you can save a bunch of money that way. But I just don't see it. They said they want to do right by John. Um, And that means you're either going to cut him before free agency starts so that he can hit the open market, or you're going to trade him, and you're going to trade him to somewhere that he wants to go. So I think you're looking at, we had a fifth. We don't have a fifth anymore. I think maybe you're looking at getting a fifth round pick straight up for John Allen, or getting like, I would, when we had a fifth, I would say maybe you do John Allen and a fifth for like a fourth or a late, like a comp third. But I don't think you're looking at anything huge return wise, but I think John Allen is 100% not coming back next year.
Yeah, I mean, I always kind of felt going into the year that didn't make sense to keep Payne and Allen, mainly because you drafted Johnny Newton and you got some other pretty good depth pieces in the interior of that line. So, one of them, I thought Payne might be a more attractive trade bait, but given that John Allen's on his last year of his deal, my guess is how this played out is John Allen's people went to the Commanders and said, let's talk extension. And they kind of went, well, we're not there, and it's not something that we're necessarily interested in doing right now. And, he asked to pursue trades. You can't blame John because, look, as much as we want these guys to be loyal to the team, this is a business decision. He wants to get out there and get one more contract, right? One more lucrative contract. And you can't blame him for wanting to do that. And I think that the team probably let him down gently that it's not going to happen here. And, we are where we are. I mean, for what it's worth, and maybe it's just talk, AB did say everything was still on the table, including having Allen come back. But I tend to agree with you. I don't see it. Maybe we can call back a draft pick, which I think would be the best case scenario for this, unless he's packaged in a Myles Garrett trade, which probably not likely there. But anyway.
No, I don't see how he would package in a Myles Garrett trade just because they have to take on that cap hit. I think you're looking at like he's gonna get traded for a late round pick, more or less. You're swapping him for Deebo Samuel. I think if you get a fifth rounder for him and you say, okay, we traded John Allen for Deebo Samuel, you say that works for us, good, and you attack a Milton Williams in free agency or something like that. And that's stuff that we're going to talk about in our next pod. There's a lot of interesting stuff happening and matriculating around the NFC East in terms of players and stuff like that definitely are in positions of need for Washington. So some stuff we could certainly talk about. But I think
matriculating, my man.
Rapping over here, man.
That's it.
Just rapping.
No one would know you're a music school student.
For sure. I think that's pretty much it, Pop. I mean, is there anything else you want to cover? Is there a free agent wide receiver that you think the Commanders should still add or you would want them to add? I got one that I think would be fun. I don't know if it'll happen, but I got one.
Nothing pops off the top of my head.
I would be really intrigued in Hollywood Brown at this point. I don't think he's going to cost you a ton of money. I think he's got that downfield speed. I think he's a different type of guy from the other guys we got around. I think if you can bring in Hollywood Brown and add it to this group, I think sneaky you're talking a top 3, top 5 wide receiver group in the NFL. I think he would be the perfect complement if you're looking free agency wise. He might be a little too rich for what we want to spend, which is okay. But I think Hollywood Brown would be fascinating to bring here.
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, there's talk of maybe Christian Kirk getting cut, and he's got ties to Cliff Kingsbury, but he'd have to obviously be available. But I think there's going to be some options out there. Yeah, I like that one. And again, that's kind of where it goes. Like we talk a lot about Diami and the other guys, but if you think there's a better option out there in free agency, someone that you're really attracted to, like a Hollywood Brown, why not?
Why not? Of those 4, Diami, Noah, Oz, Crowder, who do you think this impacts the most? I think it's Noah Brown for me. I think this is the nail in the coffin for Noah Brown not coming back.
I think it's probably Oz just because
skill set.
How you use Oz is how you're going to use Deebo. So, but yeah. Did you want to? I mean, both AP and DQ had pressers. Not a lot to take out of
they don't
pressers.
Say nothing.
They really don't say much. I mean, DQ did kind of tip his hand maybe a little bit in terms of they talked about him about offensive weapons. And he talked about, how they wanted to attack and they were going to really look to find guys that can attack, play in place. So
Be
it
violent.
sounds like he tipped a hand. He probably knew what was going on. He wanted guys to be attacking aggressive. And then, AP, I think, he just talked about the reality, right? There's 28 free agents on this roster. So we have to be active in free agency, whether it's bringing our own guys back, which he was very non-committal. I couldn't read any clues between the lines on anything that AP or DQ said related to bringing our own guys back. But obviously he did admit we're going to have to bring a fair amount of those guys back because we've got roster spots to fill. They
Yeah.
got a lot of roster spots to fill. So they'll be active in free agency because they have to be. That's AP's quote, right? So this is going to be fun. March
Yep.
10th, free agency starts in terms of what do they call it? You can start negotiating with players, but it actually doesn't become official until March 12th.
Yeah.
So we're probably going to need a midweek pod conversation on this one because news is going to be breaking. I think we're going to probably have to free up that time because our Monday morning pod's going to get stale pretty quick. But we might have to grind a little bit this week. But it's some exciting times coming real soon. So we're already rolling downhill here with this off season. Crazy.
Yep. This is the best product in the world, man. The NFL, 12 months out of the year. You can't beat it. Let's wrap this thing up, man. What do you say?
Sounds awesome.
All right. Guys, I've been Dom.
This is Pop.
Thank you for another great week, and hail to the Commanders.
Hail.